Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and we're going to be talking about basically who are good supports to build in version 1.3, of course, for Imbibitor, Lunae, Heng. I'm using base Heng here because as of time of recording is of version 1.2. The biggest problem, I think that with his overall kit, he's a very strong character, don't get me wrong. The biggest issue that I want to help solve you guys to prepare for is his skill point consumption. Why is it a big thing? Because in order to get the maximum DPS out of this character is we want to use like all 3 stacks of the skill points so that we can do as much damage as we can. There are 2 ways that you can actually go about solving it depending on which is your preference or what kind of characters you have in your roster. I'll give you some options, and for those of you who don't want so many options, I'll give you the best and top characters to build, the best supports as well. So it's very straightforward, very easy to understand. But now let's go into some theory. Let's talk about firstly, what is the first category of characters that will benefit him, because there's 2. To understand the first category, we need to know that he actually solves his own problem in his own kit as well. And that, I'm just going to put out on screen a demo from him from the official live stream as well. When he uses the ultimate ability, he actually gets 2 stacks of his special charges that can be used in place of skill points. What this means and what this implies is if you are a skill point, your whole team wants to use more skill points, not much net positive skill point characters, you want to have his burst up as much as you can, so every turn if he can cycle through his burst, he's able to use his enhanced basic attack at his max stacks as much as he can. Knowing this as a backdrop, we obviously know or intuitively are turning to a character that directly feeds him energy, and this is a character of course like Huynh, who when you use the ultimate ability, you immediately give like 50 energy. This is like level 7, and it's flat. This doesn't scale off with like energy restoration rate. So you immediately pump in 50 energy into Imbibitor Lunae, and you also increase his damage. She also has a good amount of buffing as well. So by feeding in directly the energy, you actually indirectly reduce the skill point requirements of your overall team, because he kind of like supports himself in that sense. So Huynh is going to be a very good support, probably one of the top few if you are planning to build him. But of course, I know not everyone has this character, but bear with me. Let me just explain on top of that why this character is also very strong. She's also good for the second part, which is going to be skill point positive generation. We're not done with the first part yet for battery, but let's talk a bit about the second part, skill point generation. If you think about it, when you use her skill points, she has a couple of turns on it, so she can use some turns to generate a net positive effect after using a skill basic attack kind of thing to get back into a net positive state for the team in totality. That's why Huynh is generally quite good for as a support for Imbibitor Lunae. If you have her, likely she probably will be a very easy go-to option, very intuitive, won't really think too much about it as well. So that's the first aspect, but I think the second battery for energy is not as intuitive as it sounds, and that is going to be found in 2 characters like March 7 as well as the upcoming Links. Why is this a different thing, and why is it also a battery? It's because of their ability, like the power of cuteness here, this shield that you can put, it draws aggro to the character that you want to take damage. And at first it might sound crazy, but as you take damage and you draw aggro to a particular person, you are actually redirecting the energy distribution from the enemy's attacks to one single source of a person to receive it. So if you put the shield, you put Nickss's ability on the character as well, the new character that's coming up, the Abundance character, you draw aggro to the Destruction character, and you basically funnel energy into that character, because as you take damage, you charge up your energy burst. So that is the second way of actually redirecting energy to a particular character. If you combine, for example, Nickss or maybe Huynh together with Imbibitor Lunae, you actually get something going where you have good amounts of battery going to a particular character, and that in my opinion is a pretty solid foundation if you are trying to go through the energy distribution route. Of course, doesn't mean you choose the energy battering route, means you can't go in through the battery of skill point route. You can do both at the same time, but I'm just giving you like more options to think from. So March 7 as well as Links will be an option to go for. Now let's talk about the second category of skill point batteries that you can think of. And in this sense, we need to think about characters that are generally net positive of skill points. Off the top of my head, I think support characters like March 7 or healer type characters, for example, Natasha, Nickss, you have your Jepat, you have Luota, you have Bailu to some extent. All these characters that don't really rely too much on skill, usage of skills, are generally more skill point positive for the team because they will tend to basic attack more often than not. These characters generally are much better for a character like Imbibitor Lunae, who wants to be taking up as much skill points as he can, really very similar to a playstyle, for example, like Ting Chue. So these kind of units are pretty much solid for Imbibitor Lunae, and that is like the battery point of view, because you need people to be net positive in order to funnel them in. So other than, of course, all of that, the next category of people that are not in the first two, like supports that battery him for energy, supports that battery him for skill points, these two categories aside, I want to talk about another category, which is like support characters in terms of supporting DPS output, because supports is not just like hyper carry, you just buff him. It also, you can consider other units in the game, for example, just purely either dealing damage or buffing him much more than, for example, the cost of that character. And first of all, let's talk about a character like Ireland. He doesn't consume any skill points in his kit. This makes him a very good secondary DPS for maybe a main DPS like Imbibitor Lunae. He doesn't consume skill points yet deals a good amount of damage. So that is one option that you can go. Similarly, for those of you who have Blade, Blade only consumes 1 skill points every 3 turns, which although is a net negative because he doesn't generate skill points, but the damage that he outputs is significantly high as well, which is also quite beneficial for your overall team, because even though you are net negative with this character, he's not significantly negative. He doesn't really lose out from not consuming even more skill points, but also contributes a significant amount of damage. So that is like the second character that you can think about. Other characters that are very, very strong, I think that I want to mention, of course, is a unit like Susang. Susang is strong because, especially, I think if you have an Eidolon, is it 2 or is it Eidolon 1? Yes, so when you have an Eidolon 1 here, cut with ease, when you hit a unit with physical weakness broken, she basically like gets a refund from the skill, which means this character is generally net positive, because if you are hitting a unit that's weakness broken, it doesn't need to be physical weakness broken even, you will just keep regenerating your skill points, dealing good amounts of damage, and if you need to get some skill points, you can auto attack, and when she uses her ultimate burst, she also immediately pushes herself up again, so you can get quite a lot of skill points from this unit to play with Imbibitor, Lunae, Dan Heng as well. So that is another aspect, and the thought process will apply to any character that also similarly doesn't use too much skill points. Which then comes to mind like the fourth type of characters. We've talked about a lot of categories, but the fourth one, this is the last category already, will be characters that buff him more than what they actually take from the team. And this will be characters, for example, like Yukong. Yukong offers a lot for him, especially if you have him at higher Eidolons. If you have, for example, Planetary Rendezvous, you have 24% imaginary bonus here. If you have the Trace here, another 12%, that's like 36% bonus from Yukong alone. And not only that, she also gives a lot of bonuses for him. He's going to be a character that doesn't really scale off too much with speed, because the more speed he has, the more turns he takes, means he's consuming more skill points but using it much less, because you redirect a lot of the stat distribution over to like speed instead of focusing on crit rate, crit damage as well as attack, which is not as efficient use of skill points because you want him to burst as much as you can. This means that he synergizes well with Yukong, especially if she's at higher Eidolons, in order to do more damage for the team. Especially because her ultimate ability also increases crit rate, crit damage, which she needs. I think Yukong is going to be a pretty solid character, even though she does consume quite a bit of skill points. Yes, if you have like her E6, especially if you're pulling for a couple of times on the banner, if you are lucky enough to get her E6, I do think that she's likely going to be very valuable as the fourth category. Consuming skill points, sure, not a good battery, yes, not a good significant damage dealer, and on the side also, so doesn't fit in one of 3 categories, but contributes a ton in terms of amount of DPS output that you buff the main DPS. So Yukong probably will be my fourth category as a very solid character type of unit to build as well. And other units that I think about, even though they are not like super net positive in terms of skill points, will be characters like Silverwolf, who defends shred enemies, you implant weaknesses, you rest shred also, which is beneficial for Imbibitor Lunae, and of course characters like Pella herself, who also defends shreds. You have the option of removing buffs from enemies, dealing a bit of damage on the side as well. She does use a bit of skill points also here and there, not always net positive, and doesn't directly benefit, but I think she's also a pretty good addition, especially for the defense shred that she sees in her kit as well. And of course characters like Bronya, who do consume a lot of skill points. In my opinion, this is a tricky one, because if Bronya pushes him up, she uses 1 skill point. And if Imbibitor Lunae doesn't have his ultimate ability, or if he's at his maybe higher Eidolons and he can act himself, then I think that's a very tricky one, because you consume a lot of skill points and it's very difficult to get all of the skill points back as well. But we will have to see, we have to do the testing numbers as well. And those are my thoughts in terms of individual characters that work well with Imbibitor Lunae. But looking at individual characters are not enough. I think at this point, point, we want to look at it in terms of how do we build totality like teams, and because especially when we need to consider the number of characters that we have in the game, not all the time you can get a perfect fit. And in this next video, I highly recommend you check out the best teams for Imbibitor Lunae here on this channel as well. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.